Happy Easter and welcome to Garden City Church, a place where you can belong before you believe. If you'd like to support the channel here, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can like and subscribe. You can share this with a friend you think would enjoy it, and you can also support us financially. George talks with us today about what do we do with the pain and the evil and the darkness and the weight that we feel in our lives and in the world today, and how does Jesus give us a model for what to do with that? And I want to invite you to stay tuned afterwards for some new music from the band. It's going to be great. Thanks for joining us today. Let's get into the Word with George.
Happy Easter. So glad you're with us. You know, I remember being on a camping trip when we had a special night with a special dinner. The kids loved it because everybody could kind of make what they wanted, and then we wrapped all these different things with different sauces and ketchup and mustard and hot sauce. We wrapped it up in tin foil, and then we placed it in the campfire to slowly cook. And the kids were waiting with anticipation as the food heated up, and you can kind of hear sizzling, and all of a sudden it was the right moment to start taking everybody's dinner out of the fires. And there was a moment, apparently, we weren't even aware of it when it happened, where my brother-in-law, Aaron, opened his, and there was a release of a plume of sriracha sauce. He didn't notice it because he was walking with it, but this sriracha plume landed on, I think it was my son first, and he was like, "Oh, my eyes are burning," and he started coughing, and my wife thought he was just acting silly. She's like, Stop acting silly. And then all of a sudden it hit her, and she's like, "My eyes are burning." And she started coughing, and we all started coughing. And the only one not coughing was Aaron, because he had gone to the edge of the campsite to eat his and some, a moment of peace. And we were like, "What's happening?" And he's like, "I think it's the sriracha sauce." And it not only spread into our camp, but into other people's camps. We all of a sudden started hearing some coughing and people saying, "My eyes are tearing up, my eyes are burning." And this plume of sriracha just moved throughout the whole camp. And Aaron said, "I didn't know what I was doing." Jesus has this statement where he says, "Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing." As humans, there's so often we can accidentally or unknowingly do things without being aware of it. In fact, when we look at the story of Jesus, we see forms of toxic religion and politics and human selfish coming together and crucifying Jesus, the Son of God. And as they were crucifying him, Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." Now, for today's teaching, I really want to look at some of the human responses we have to pain and anger and darkness, and some of the more difficult and maybe dark things that humans will carry and not know what to do with. In the story of the cross and resurrection, we see a few things revealed. Humans often do one of two things with their pain and their darkness. They either transmit it or they transfer it. We transmit darkness to someone, sometimes through other people, and then we transfer onto. Transmitting is passing it on, transferring is placing it on, and we do both of these things without knowing it, without realizing it or being aware sometimes. So let's talk about the response of transmitting darkness, pain, anger, anxiety, worry for a moment. Now, when we transmit, we pass on our pain, anger, anxieties, or guilt along to family members, friends, loved ones, and even the most vulnerable. It's a lot like that sriracha plume that spread into the camp. Or I don't know if you've ever been in a room where like one person yawns and all of a sudden another person yawns. And pretty soon everybody in the room yawns. It just gets passed on or through other people. And humans, we do that with our pain without knowing it sometimes. Now let's talk about the second response that we do sometimes without even knowing it. And this is transferring on. When we transfer our pain, anger, anxiety, control, guilt, or darkness, we don't just pass it on, we actually place it on. We place it on someone or a group of someone's, often referred to as scapegoating, finding someone to blame or place our guilt, rage, anxiety, and so on, so that we can alleviate these negative feelings. Now, this scapegoat pattern has really been developed by a man named Rene Girard. He observed how human communities mistreat, marginalize, reject, persecute individuals and groups to alleviate that guilt, that fear or rage, etc. Now, when we transfer our darkness, it can be sometimes very passive or mild forms of blame, persecution, and dehumanization, or very active and cruel forms of the same things that end up dehumanizing individuals. Tim Keller has noted this human reality usually begins more passively and then it snowballs toward more active and cruel types of scapegoating. We see this in the Jesus story. In the book of John, the religious leaders laid out this scapegoat transfer or mechanism toward Jesus. When the religious leaders were talking about this, they said, "It is better for you that one man die for the people rather than the whole nation be destroyed." That was said by the leader at that time, Caiaphas. He was one of the leading priests. Scapegoating is the one suffering for the many. The one person or the one group being blamed, dehumanized by the many projecting their darkness upon the one. Now, Blaise Pascal wrote this: "People never do evil so completely and so cheerfully as when they do it with a religious conviction." Oh, once we escape someone or a group and say they are the problem, it's really easy to think that we don't have to look at the problems within. If we want to see an image that really shows the response of transmitting or transferring by humans onto others and into others' lives, we don't have to go any farther than the story of the cross. In Matthew 27, it says, "Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and then to have Jesus killed. Pilate said to them, 'Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?' And all of them, taking the lead of the priests, said, 'Let him be crucified.' And then he asked, 'Well, why? What evil has he done?' But they shouted all the more, 'Let him be crucified.'" I mean, Pilate was even admitting that he's innocent. There's nothing that he's done to deserve this. And this transmitting, the leaders were transmitting their darkness into the crowds, and then the crowds transmitting their darkness to Pilate in a snowball effect that becomes a transferring of darkness onto the scapegoat, Jesus. People can feel overly empowered or powerless in the face of such force. But sometimes leaders do know what they're doing in working people up to divide and scapegoat a person or a people group, like we see in this story with the religious leaders. They might not have fully understood what they were doing to the Son of God, but they knew that they were manipulating something. Now, unless something changes, this pattern doesn't change. These forces continue to transmit their pain and darkness to each other and transfer their pain and darkness onto somebody or some group of people. I want us to just think for a moment, like the two crosses on either side of Jesus, who's in the middle of the tension. We either transmit our darkness or we transfer it. Is there anything we can do about all the anger, all the guilt, all the control needs and fears and the darkness that we might be misplacing and displacing? I want to share with you, if we look to the cross, if we look to the resurrection of Jesus, we don't have to transfer it or transmit it. Jesus shows us a way that we can transform it. So what I'd like to do is walk you through really some portraits that John, the author of in the book of John, he's curated at the end of his story. We're going to look at 4 portraits that look at the death and resurrection. We're going to look at 4 portraits of the death and resurrection of Jesus, the Lamb that was slain, to help us transform our darkness, our pain, our guilt, our hurt, rather than transmit or transfer it. The first of John's portraits or images that I want us to just reflect on is this from John 19:25. "Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother." Jesus is on the cross and his mother is at the foot of the cross, and Mary is standing there holding, carrying her pain. Jesus is carrying and holding his pain. Neither of them are transmitting or transferring their pain, their agony, their anger, their injustice, or the darkness that's descended on them. They're not passing that on to anyone. Rather, they transform their pain by refusing to return it. They carry it rather than giving it to others and continue a cycle of revenge or anger and ugliness. And by holding the tension and the pain rather than giving it out to anyone or giving payback, by holding the tension, they exhaust it, they extinguish it. The second of John's portraits is this. When they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. Now, this image, if we allow ourselves to reflect on it in the wider story, is drawing from Jesus' first miracle in the book of John, where Jesus turns water to wine. And there's this imagery that is, I think, evoking something really important. In this portrait, Jesus refuses to pass darkness to others or place it on anyone else. Instead, he not only carries it, but he converts it into something good. The best response to the bad and the ugly is the practice of the good and beautiful. As blood and water are flowing from his side, it reminds us that on the cross, just like his first miracle of turning water to wine, Jesus receives the darkness and violence of the world and returns only goodness, love, and forgiveness. He is converting darkness to light. In this moment, Jesus is saying scapegoating and transmitting ugliness ends here. And he decides not to pass it on. The third portrait that I'd like to just reflect on says this: these things happen so that the scripture would be fulfilled. They will look on the one they have pierced. This is a powerful image. They will look on the one they have pierced. It's almost as if John is trying to help us see ourselves, almost a slow realization and revealing of what we have done. Not just the one person using the spear, that we have all been part of a process that has put something horrible and ugly at work and ended in something terrible, that we have done the piercing. And Jesus refuses to mirror darkness and pain. Instead, in this picture, he reveals it. They will look on the one that they have pierced. Often, once we scapegoat someone and say they are the problem, we no longer have to look at the problem, or we think it's gone, or we never have to look at the problems within. Because the problem's out there, it's not here. At least we tell ourselves that. But this portrait forces us to look deeper. When it says they will look on the one, it makes us slow down and see ourselves. This is a picture of revealing. And this reveals that the sin is not just out there, but in here, with me, with us. And the guilt that was placed on Jesus was really guilt that we were carrying. Darkness that we placed on Jesus was darkness we were carrying. This portrait makes us ask the question, will we say scapegoating ends with us? And the passing on of darkness and transmitting of darkness will end here with us and give love instead. Now, the fourth and final portrait I want us to look at is maybe a familiar one. About a guy named Thomas. It says, now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus had come. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. This is Jesus' resurrection after the cross. We have seen the Lord, they said. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my fingers where the nails were and put my hands into his side, I will not believe. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. He appears to Thomas. And then he says to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands? Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Remember where they pierced him with the spear? And Jesus says, stop doubting and believe. And Thomas says to him, my Lord and my God. Instead of resenting the failures or doubts of his disciples, Jesus restores them. And then Jesus shows Thomas that he is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the resurrection. And then out of his wounds, the transforming of wounds given to Jesus, this is how new life is being released. By his wounds, we are healed and given a new way, a new vision of a world being restored by God. And that we can join that. And we don't have to participate or continue the patterns of our world and the ways of the world we live in, of transmitting our pain to others or transferring our darkness onto others. The way of Jesus shows us the way of transformation and resurrection. So I want to invite you to 4 reflections and to some kind of a response to whichever one of the portraits stood out to you the most. The first portrait, we were learning from Mary and Jesus to carry pain rather than pass it along. The second portrait, we learned from Jesus to convert our pain and anger and our hurt and darkness into something loving, into something good, into something beautiful. In the third portrait, we're being pulled into seeing ourselves. It's a moment of revealing who we are and where we struggle. And in the fourth portrait, we see the wounds of Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, showing the wounds, his hands, his side, to Thomas and to those who are struggling, those who are doubting, and giving them restoration, forgiveness, and a vision of a whole new world. And Jesus said, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. If you need maybe a step of forgiveness and receiving restoration today, take a moment and ask God for that. If you need maybe ask God to help reveal to you where you're struggling with some of these responses of transmitting or transferring pain and darkness, and then pray about that. If you're needing help with carrying and then converting pain and darkness into something more beautiful and good, take a moment to pray and respond to that. Because if we are a community that begins stepping into this, we can write a new and beautiful story happening in a world that really, really needs it. Guys, I love you so much. Happy Easter.
I will remember what you said. It's truer than where these feet have been. You carried me, even when pain is in the night. I will wait for joy to rise, like morning time. tell